Matt is a friend of the program. Matt, what is up, my brother?
Hey, fellas, thanks for having me here, especially having me after I wrote a story in a headline that I'm sure is just what everybody wants to be talking about right now.
Yeah,
it's always a pleasure.
But is it true or not? I tend to agree with you, given the way the BYU's been, the last 12 years, going to bowl games, winning about an average of 8 games, which to me is kind of the minimum threshold for a good team in college football. So for those who haven't read the article, summarize why you think BYU is the most disappointing team in college football this year.
Sure. So I got a lot of feedback on my timeline about this particular headline from lots of fan bases, and the reason that I picked this, right, is I define most disappointing as a team with the biggest gap between what they were projected to be and what they actually are.
Sure.
Right? There's a lot of different metrics you can use to figure out, what a team was supposed to be. At SBNation, we put a lot of emphasis on something that we think is the quintessence of advanced stats. And that's the S&P Plus rankings. So that's what evaluates a team on adjusted for tempo and how they perform on a per-play basis. So going into the season, BYU is projected to be about 48th, which is about what they've been for the last decade, right? Like that's a team that's around top 50, top 40. Vegas has an over-under with BYU, I think, between 8 and 10 wins, depending on the book. And if you look at S&P Plus now, they're one of the absolute worst teams in the country. They're worse than Coastal Carolina. They're worse than Massachusetts. They're worse than Rutgers.
Worse than UMass.
Worse by 1 point. By 1 point, yeah. The BYU still projected is more likely than not to beat UMass. So that's the biggest gap in the country. It's bigger than Tennessee. It's bigger than Florida State, and it's bigger than some of the teams that we thought were going to stink and then actually do in fact stink, like Kansas. So that's why I wrote that headline.
In the piece, there was a very interesting question that really jumped out to me. In there's a question, is this just a blip on the radar or the beginning of a longer rebuild? What do you think the answer to that question is?
Man, that's tough. I can tell you going into this season, I'm happy to put myself on blast. I didn't think this was going to be a rebuilding year at all. I think the last time we talked was before the year, and I think I was with most people that thought, yeah, this is probably an 8 or 9 win team that could steal a game or two in the beginning of the month. And if you want to take the optimistic view, you can look into this offense and say, well, you're bringing back all your quarterbacks. You should bring back every running back that's touched the ball. You should bring back almost every wide receiver, and you're getting some reinforcements along your offensive line. So, just by virtue of returning that much experience, you almost can't be this bad again. But the schedule's going to be pretty hard again next year, too. From watching the team this year, I'm not sure if it's really defined exactly what their offensive identity is supposed to be. And you can return a bunch of players, but if those players aren't productive and don't improve, you're not looking at a big improvement. So I wouldn't, based on what I've watched so far this year, I don't see a 9 or a 10 win team next season, but there's still plenty more games left to be played.
Matt Brown of SB Nation is on BYU Sports Nation. The Cougars hoping to win the next 6 and salvage something from this year, and going to a bowl game I think would be quite the event given a 6-game losing streak, the longest streak since 1968 at BYU. Looking at that schedule, and we've talked about it, Fresno State's the best team at 4-2, and then it's a bunch of sub-500 teams. Do you think this 1-6 BYU team can win 6 in a row?
They can. The math, for the efficiency data doesn't really like their chances because it sees several of these games as close to toss-ups. But none of them are really very good. So sure, if the offensive efficiency just improves a little bit, they can win. East Carolina has just a horrific defense. I've watched UNLV a fair amount this year, and that defense is really, really bad. So it's possible. But for me, I almost think that the bigger goal is less about whether BYU gets to 500 and plays in some lower tier bowl game or not, but whether individual playmakers at the skill position talent really separate themselves over the next 6 weeks. Because if you miss a bowl game, but then you could say, we've clearly identified this is our running back, and these are the 2 wide receivers that we know we're going to depend on next year, and here's this upward trajectory. I think that's probably better for BYU's long-term future than, winning a couple of 15 to 12, kind of games against UNLV and then eking into a CUSA bowl game.
Well, this was a conversation full of positivity for the fan base. Matt, we call you the Vin Diesel of our program because we go fast and furious. We appreciate the time, brother.
You bet. Hey, listen. I'll just end here with this. You're going to East Carolina, right? Right?
Yes.
There is good news here. That's a really fun place to watch a college football game, and there's really, really good food. So
Yes,
if you live in the East
Thank
and you're
you.
listening to this, like trust me on this. Go to Greenville. You're going to love it. There's going to be 50,000, very polite, passionate fans. You're going to get excellent barbecue, and you're going to, what more can you want out of that? Sometimes the football games aren't good, but you'll eat well.
You saved the interview. Matt, we appreciate the time. Thanks, brother.